You are live. Let's just check though, actually, buddy. And by buddy, I'm not referring to you, my millions of adoring fans. I'm referring to StreamYard because this StreamYard has been a little wackadoo, and I think it's trying to pull some stuff, and I for one will not have that. So, much to my chagrin, Reiko and I got on the call this morning and discovered there is something weird going on with StreamYard. We have a long delay in our pausing. So it was like, this dates me, but it was like the long distance calls back in the day. So back when we had landlines and back when you had to pay a bunch of money to call anywhere outside of your local area, you would have long distance, and long distance had this very awkward pause. And so that's what it was like for Reiko and I. So the way we tested it was we would count in sequence. So I'd say one, he'd say two, and then, oh, my cameras jumped in here to let me know, hey, by the way, I'm no good, but check it out. I've solved this. Take that, camera. So anyway, we'll just do a bit of a live show today, sans guest, and then we'll make sure that we get another time to bring Reiko on because I really want to chat with him about his leadership journey. I think it's been a really cool one. So we'll take a sip of coffee out of this Hedwig mug. Ooh. Oh, that's some good coffee. Currently, we have 0 viewers. I would like to know, what is your favorite accent to do yourself? Me personally, I was sharing with a friend of mine who's a accomplished singer, and I was just relating to the fact that I feel bad around people that have an accent other than mine, because that means just for the next entire friendship that we have, I'm going to be saying words the way they do. And it sounds like I'm doing an impression of them, but it's more just that I want to be inside their mouth making those sounds. So I think obviously Scottish is a good one. You know, their problem got a lot bigger than they had thought. That's a very enjoyable one. That's kind of a safe accent to do too. Like I feel like, hey Dave, hey David. Oh, a Cuban accent. Huh, that's intriguing. I don't know how to do a Cubano accent. I know how Al Pacino did it, which was to say somewhat disastrously in Scarface. Good morning, Dave. Oh, Marta saying false. You got one viewer here, although just for a few minutes. One viewer times a million adoring fans. But thanks for calling me out, Marta. Jeez, mean. Cubano accent, other accents. I'm curious about this. I feel like Scottish is the one that people divert to. One of the things I love about England is you've got 60 billion different dialects and accents. You travel like 10 kilometers and you're in an entire different country. Okay, well, I didn't create too much of a plan for our conversation today, so I'm going to generate this in the moment. And I like doing that for a few reasons. The big one being that this is the heart of leadership. So a lot of us, we don't really want to have this experience where we show up and then we occur like we don't know what we're doing, or like we don't have things figured out. Because if I don't have things figured out, then I'm going to feel stupid, or I'm going to stutter, or I'm going to get it wrong, and I won't be able to generate, and then people will lose faith in me, and then blah, 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 blah. It just cascades like that. And if we're leading into anything new and unknown, we're not already going to have it figured out. And so what that creates is this interesting dynamic where we are effectively trying to get enough of what we don't really need. And we can never get enough of what we don't really need. So the way that plays out is I'm afraid of looking stupid. And so what I try to get enough of is like prepared or credible or whatever it is that I believe I need to overcome this fear of looking stupid. But the trouble is that I can never overcome that fear, because the fear is really just part and parcel what comes with being in the unknown. So that becomes a quixotic game. I can spend the rest of my life trying to prepare. And this is what I did with this. Your version will probably be a little bit different, but all of us have some flavor of like trying to get enough of what we don't really need. And in fact, what sets us free is when we start to be able to just allow ourselves to feel kind of dumb. or allow ourselves to feel kind of clumsy, or allow ourselves to feel kind of foolish, or whatever it is, whatever that experience is, that we've created an allergic reaction to it. What are you saying here, David? Ultimately, we need nothing, but boy, what a journey. Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's sort of like when people say, when we ask them, you know, what's getting in your way, and they say, oh, it's fear. Like they've kind of they've got it, they've got their hands around it. They're like, oh, the thing that's getting in my way is fear. Of course, it's always fear, but sometimes that's not a very distinguished level of perception, right? If all I know about what's getting in my way is that it's scary, I can't get too far. Whereas if I can distinguish something to the point where I'm like, oh, what's getting in my way is my fear, and if I can distinguish that further, it's that I'm worried about looking stupid, and then I can distinguish even further and be like, what am I doing in response or in reaction to this fear of looking stupid? Oh, I'm trying to like over prepare, and I'm trying to. So the more we can do with that, the better. The more we can distinguish something, the more access we have to it. And so, yeah, we need nothing. You're right on some level. And then on the other levels, there's sort of like, if I'm leaning into my fear, what do I really need to do? I need to allow my fear to be. So if I'm caught in this energetic vortex of trying to like prepare enough so that I don't feel afraid, that will never work. But what will work is if I change my relationship to my fear. If I shift my relationship to one where I kind of come to terms with it and accept like it's not going to go away, and all I really have to do is take on the thing I'm committed to taking on and allow myself to feel afraid, allow myself to feel stupid, allow myself to feel whatever it is that I'm feeling in the moment that I don't like, that I'm trying to shy away from or escape. Okay, Dave, David, Marta, whoever else is here, help me out. Give me some, let's just do improvisational leadership. So just throw some topics in the chat, anything at all. Anything, you can give me your worst thing, but just put some stuff in the chat for me. I've got a couple, but I'm kind of feeling, since we're in the moment today and we're picking up after some technical breakdowns, it would be really helpful to get a few bonus items. So anything you can put in the chat would be awesome. The first thing I want to talk about is an idea I've been sketching out, which is, well, the idea is not something I've been sketching out, but the distinguishing around it is. And so this idea is your relational pattern. And our relational pattern is the pattern that we inevitably fall into in every relationship on some level. So the easiest way to see your relational pattern. Marta's saying I missed a question. The thing I said is just give me something to talk about leadership wise, something that irks you, something that's annoying. What's something that you've noticed around leadership? What's something that's up in your world related to leadership? Anything along those lines, so I can just riff on something while I'm creating topics myself in the moment. So to this idea of a relational pattern, the easiest way to see our relational or our relationship pattern is to look for our perennial complaints about our partners. So maybe I have a complaint, like what would a complaint from me be? My partner never listens to me, or I am underappreciated, or I'm always the one taking responsibility, or people are always like, my partner's always taking advantage of me. So whatever it is that like ongoingly is sort of the complaint that we have in relationship, that's usually the best way to see our relational pattern. As the saying goes, you know, if everyone is always doing something, you're the constant. And so it's like if all of your partners perpetually seem to be X, Y, or Z, then you're the constant. And that's it's easy to flippantly say it someone when they're annoying us, but when it's us that's like in the throes of this relational pattern, it is not so easy. Frankly, it's really annoying. David's saying he has the same complaints as me. I thought, David, you were saying you have those complaints about me. So So it's very, oh, that's fantastic, Marta. Thank you. I'm going to speak to that. Um, so what happens, we have these perennial complaints, and then those tell us how relationship is going to go for you. And I'm going to first speak about this in a broader or a different context so we can kind of see how this plays out a little bit, which is often we're just about to start the forage. We start in 2 weeks' time. And when people are in a conversation with me about it, this year-long transformational process, one of their questions is often, I'm really concerned about feeling overwhelmed and feeling like busy and like taking on too much. Do you think that that will show up for me in the forge? And my question to them is probably super annoying. What I ask them is, well, let me ask you, is that a familiar feeling for you? Is that something you typically feel in your life? Like something you're aware of that often shows up? Yes. Oh my God. Yes, totally. Great. You will almost certainly feel that way in the forge. And what I'm pointing to is that given this is a familiar feeling for them, there is something, I guarantee you, about the way this person shows up in their life that leads to an experience of overwhelm. And the forage, like what we as humans do, is we go seeking the perfect container or guru or teacher or place to live or job, such that it's or relationship, I should say, such that it's the one where my life, it doesn't always go the way it always seems to go. Like if I could just find that one person or that one structure, or if I could just arrange the circumstances of my life before I say yes, then I could avoid this experience. That becomes the thing we don't really need. And in the forge and in coaching, we actually, our commitment is to disabuse you of that notion, to set aside this idea that if you just find the perfect place, then you can rest, you can settle, you can blah, blah, blah. In fact, what'll happen is they'll come into the forge and then they will 100% create this experience of overwhelm. And at first, what they might be doing is like trying to manage their life and plan their life and do everything perfectly so that that overwhelm never, hey, Darren, good to see you. So that that overwhelm never makes it through the door. So kind of like, pushing against the door, working really hard to have things go the perfect way they're meant to go this time. This time, I'm not going to get my overwhelm. But inevitably, it's going to happen because what is happening behind the scenes is that these people are unconsciously creating that perennial complaint. And so the magic of the forge is that that overwhelm shows up and we have a commitment and a container on the table such that you can then be like, fuck, I'm overwhelmed. This sucks. I'm not happy. I'm not enjoying myself. I feel exhausted. I'm missing things. I want to quit. Hey, Andy, good to see you. And from that place, then we can actually support you to start to work out how you created the overwhelm and how to set it aside and have things go differently instead of just quitting. So this is what happens in a structure like the forge, and this is what happens in our relationships. In our relationships, we're like, oh, I always end up with someone who takes up all the space and never leaves any space for me. So as soon as it's always, right, there's our first clue. Always. Interesting. And then you're going to end up in that relationship with someone and you're going to work really hard to like maybe take up the space or to like hold sort of like, I'm going to be really gentle with them and I'm going to allow them to be the way they are and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. But inevitably, it's going to be just a matter of time before you get to that point where you're like, they're taking up all the space. This is our relationship pattern. And so our relationship pattern is made up of the perennial complaint that we have, and then the thing that we've learned to do, the reactive response. So when that starts to show up, what is our default? What is it that we automatically do? And then there's like a whole bunch of other sort of stuff that like knock-on effects from that. So the game in romantic relationship or really in any relationship becomes the same as the game I just described when people are looking at considering the forge, which is we go into the world trying to find the one perfect person who is not going to show up according to our relationship pattern. If I could just find the person that cares only about me and that only listens to me. And there's like a couple of trickaroos here. Trickaroo one is notice that the way I just described that, all you've done is you flipped it. So now you're the person that takes up all the space, and this person takes up no space. I found the person that just wants to listen to me, and that blah, 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 blah. The second part of this is that our relationship pattern will make itself known to the in correspondence to the degree of intimacy in a relationship. So if I have an acquaintance, this pattern is not going to be, it's not going to show up very much because relationally, there's not a lot of bandwidth in the space between us. You know, we kind of like, we chat, we do small talk. We might be like, how's that boat you bought? Oh, cool. I'd like a boat one day. All right, well, see you later. Big gulps, eh? And then that's it. You know, so there's not a lot of bandwidth in which the pattern can kind of make itself known and show up. It's still going to be there. It's still going to be in the space, but there's just less data in which to see the image of your pattern showing up. So you can think of this a little bit like, you know, there's this kind of toy that used to be around with iron filings. You'd like set up magnets under a piece of paper, and then you dump iron filings on the paper, and they would, it's very cool. They would take the shape of the magnets underneath. You can make this neat sort of artwork. And so the level of intimacy in a relationship is a function of how much iron filings you have to put on the paper. So if there's very little intimacy, if I'm just like, you know, if I've just met someone, I'm putting like 3 iron filings and I'm going to see them just land on the paper. So that pattern's not very well expressed. There's not a lot of juice or bandwidth for it to show up. Whereas with my friends, there's more iron filings for me to dump. So the image can be more seen, and all of us are going to be more present to our part of that pattern playing out. And then in a romantic relationship, or like with your family of origin, you've just got an infinite hose of iron filings that you're dumping on the page. So the pattern itself becomes very well known, very, very obvious to us, very, very like bright. We can't not see it. So what are you saying here, David? You hope to do small talk with me in Costa Rica? Well, I look forward to, what will our small talk be? We'll probably like acknowledge each other's hair and talk a lot about the weather maybe, and then sort of like turn around and walk into a pole and spin out, do something like that. So we can't avoid our relationship pattern. What we can do is we can block off the amount of intimacy in our bandwidth with someone. So by holding people at a certain level of like distance, either physically or more often emotionally and energetically, meaning I just don't let them in to all of my stuff, then there's less filings, there's less bandwidth in the relationship, and therefore the pattern doesn't become as obvious. It's not such bright lines with which it shows up. I had a really good friend, had a really good friend who was sharing with me, this was a number of years back in a relationship that's no longer happening, but he was sharing that he had this person, they liked each other, but they'd figured out that the best way for them to be in relationship was to not move in together and just stay separate for one another. And this is not intended as a criticism whatsoever of that. You know, we have to find whatever there is for us to find that really suits us. But the one thing I do know for sure about doing that is it's going to reduce the level of intimacy that's available in a partnership. It has to, right? Because you're not in it with people to the same extent. You're not on top of each other. And in doing that, it's going to create a little more or a little less bandwidth, a little less space for that relationship pattern to show up and be quite so obvious. So the closer we allow someone in, the more our relationship pattern is going to show up. So on the one hand, this is like terrible news that I'm sharing with you. It's like a really good reason why don't create intimacy. Keep distance, and then things will be better off. Unfortunately, the pattern's still there no matter what. It's not that those magnets under the paper, they don't go anywhere. That's something you carry with you everywhere. It's just that you have less iron filings, and so there's less for you and the person on the other side of the table to really be present to. but it's still happening. I'm still finding ways to subtly resent the person across from me for not letting me speak enough, or for not putting themselves into the space enough, or whatever it happens to be. So that's always playing out on some level. The magic, I think, of distinguishing this is twofold. One, we can start to take back the power in our life. We give a lot of our power over to the other person when we don't have this distinguished as our pattern. When we have this distinguished, when we're holding this sort of like, oh, it's the way they show up, they always X, Y, or Z. What that does is it puts it makes it a problem. Two, it puts the problem over there. And three, because the problem's over there, there's nothing for me to really take a look at. And consequently, it's hard for me to really do much about this other than complain about my partner and hope that if I complain enough to enough people, they'll tell my partner, and then my partner will get the hint, and then they'll change. They'll transform themselves. It won't work. Whereas if I can start to see like, wow, this person is showing up the same way as the last 5 people, is showing up the same way as my friends often do. If I can start to see that, then I can start to recognize, oh, this is an Adam thing. Like I must be creating this in some way. And if I can see that, then I can start to show up differently. I can make different choices. I can start to look at this a little bit differently. And that allows me to actually change the way things go. There's a couple caveats to this. And then Darren has been very dear and provided me a bunch of topics. I'm gonna jump into those. I'm going to slurp some coffee too. Caveat 1 is that your pattern is always, you're only ever playing half of your pattern, which is to say, if you have a pattern, if your relational pattern, the complaint in it is that people never give you the space to speak, your part of the pattern is you show up and you look to try to find people to fill the space. And then you look for people, like what that does is it lets you off the hook of having to fill the space yourself, of having to have the spotlight on you, of having to have people fill out the blank, right? It doesn't really matter the specifics. You can distinguish that for yourself, but there's some payoff to you getting to be the one that doesn't take up all the space, that someone else does, because then maybe you don't get judged for what you put into the space, et cetera, et cetera. So we're only ever doing half of it because it's true that your partner, whatever person you're looking at in the relationship, romantic partner, father, mother, brother, sister, friend, acquaintance, boss, etc., they're doing the other half. So it's challenging for people to accept that what we're describing here is their relational pattern, because there is a reality that I don't want to step over, which is but that person really does this stuff, and you're right about that. The trouble is, it doesn't matter that you're right about it. And in fact, the more you insist that you're right about it, the more that stops you from being able to see your half of the mix. And so, yeah, this person takes up all the space. Yeah, they're narcissistic tendency-wise. But simultaneous to that, you are like a perfect key fitting their lock. You are actually going into the world looking for people like this, because it allows you then to have someone else take up all the space, and then you get to sit and armchair quarterback them or judge them or be frustrated with them, but still not put something into the space. And you would put something into the space if only this person gave you space to do so, but they don't, so you won't, so blah, blah, blah. Peace is struck, right? There's this uneasy balance. So that's the nature of this stuff. And so I want to offer grace to the fact that what you can see over there, it's not that it's wrong, it's just that it doesn't matter, because our work lies here with us, at least if we're seeking a transformational kind of result. The second caveat, I should take a breath. I'm feeling breathless. Good stuff. The second caveat is that my dogs are going to bark in the background, and that's going to come through on the mic. The third caveat is that you'll have all of these relational patterns are polarized. So in the example I just gave, so-and-so always takes up all the space. The pole to that, or the reciprocal, if you like, is that you never take up any of the space. So there's always a polarization that happens. And we will have a comfortable place that we hang out that we kind of know we can own. So yeah, my partner's super selfish, but I'm a doormat. I'm overly generous. My partner always takes up all the space, but I know that I'm never willing to step into the space. The caveat to that is that you'll also play out some version of the pole. And what happens is that because we have a lot of judgment about how our partner shows up, that judgment makes it very hard for us to see that we do the same thing. It just sits in our blind spots. Whatever you have a lot of judgment about, that's what's in your blind spot, because your judgment is basically a structure that says, I would never be that way because that way sucks ass. And once you've determined, official leadership term, once you've determined that a particular way of being sucks ass, you have a vested interest in not seeing yourself doing that. In fact, you're going to end up quite insistent that you would never show up that way. That's never how you would be. So we often, in this relational pattern, we do the one version of the pole that's sort of acceptable to us. And then we're also doing the other side, the thing our partner does, but that's harder for us to see and even accept because we are rife with judgment about it, which is part of the reason we learn to polarize in the other direction. If you have a ton of judgment about people being selfish, you will probably have a partner that on some level you will find selfish, and you will probably be overly generous. You will be almost like a doormat. You'll give people the shirt off your back, your back, shirt off your back. And you will probably struggle with boundaries. So all of this sort of fits together. And this gives us this nice, what I call an uneasy balance in our relationship. Someone on Substack was writing the other day, she was just preparing a piece about one-sided relationships. And I was really intrigued by this because I don't think this really exists. I think my experience working with a ton of people in relationships is that a one-sided relationship is really a relationship in which we're only hearing about one side of it. And if we went over to the other side and talked to the person on the other side about that relationship, we would probably hear their version of how their partner is never willing to take up any space, or their partner is never willing to say, like, I want to do this for myself, or their partner is never willing to whatever. And my experience is that every relationship ends up in some kind of uneasy balance. Not healthy necessarily, but an uneasy balance. So the really edgy thing to talk about would be sort of like abusive relationships, where one partner is like kind of abusive and then the other, or abusive outwardly, and then the other partner is abusive inwardly. So they are like, I suck. And that's going to be a natural fit. With those two will naturally find itself. And this is often why when people get out of abusive relationships, it's challenging because there is an uneasy balance that comes from finding the next abuser. This is not victim blaming. This is more simply to acknowledge, like, this relational pattern is always seeking to assert itself, because in that assertion, there's an uneasy balance. I'll give an example that might be less confronting, maybe less of a hot take. Can I remember it? Let's find out. Nope. I think the take was too hot. I think it left my brain. So anyhow, we're always creating our relational pattern everywhere. And the last thing I want to talk about on this is when people get into like really like a powerful coaching relationship, this is going to happen. It's really, really challenging because as people, coaching relationships very deeply intimate. We are working with someone that we are sharing our deepest stuff with. We're sharing our judgments. We're sharing our frustrations. We're letting it all out. It's in terms of the bandwidth or the fabric of the relationship, how much stuff is in the space there, it's incredibly rich. And so inevitably, the relationship is going to go a particular way that will be aligned with the client's relational pattern. And coaching's a bit, it's a unidirectional relationship in that, what's the, like, in sort of colloquially speaking, the job of the client is to bring their garbage to the coach, and the job of the coach is to bring their gold to the client. And the only way that can work is, one, that there are some boundaries set around the relationship, meaning we have a set time that we're in a coaching conversation. We are not 24 hours a day spending all the time in the world with each other, and all that ever happens if I bring you my gold, because that's inhuman. But I can do it for a set amount of time where I'm really present and committed. Two, that I'm working with my own coach so that I can offload my garbage, because I got a bunch of it, as do all of us. So in order for me to hold that really clean, pure space for my client, I actually have to have a coach where I can offer my own stuff. The extent to which a coach does not have their own coach where they can bring their garbage is the extent to which they are unable to offer just gold to the client. And in the absence of being able to do that, what ends up happening is a lessening of the intimacy in the space between the coach and the client. And so the way that looks is basically like coaching relationships and conversations that are lukewarm. They're fine, they're okay, but there's a lot of like painting turds with glitter, a lot of, silver lining on all the clouds, no bad days. Here's how you could feel okay about that, rather than really getting into the muck with people and really like moving through the muck together. So it's a bit exceptional, right? A coaching relationship on some level is kind of unique in that the way that works and meets relationship patterns is the client's going to come in and they're going to dump their stuff on the coach, not because the client's doing something wrong. Well, actually, I'm going to follow this path, and then I'm going to pick something up on the back end, because I don't want to let the coach off the hook entirely. The client is going to come in and dump some stuff on the coach. They're naturally going to recreate the relationship pattern. And this happens regardless of our attempts. We go looking for evidence in the world of proof that our pattern is playing out. If I have a story that people don't take me seriously, I'm going to come into the coaching just like I'm going to come into every other relationship, and I'm going to be like, where's I know that they don't take me seriously because no one takes me seriously. This is unconscious. I know it's here. Where's the proof? And then I find whatever the proof that I can find is, and then I take it, and then I'm like, aha, I knew it. And then we start to build a case. This isn't specific to coaching. This happens for every single human. It's just what we do. And so that's naturally going to happen. And over time, the client's going to build up some resentment. And this is going to be more kind of available in the space. It's more likely to happen because the relationship's so intimate and rich. Now, of course, the coach is doing their best job to bring their gold to the client and to be really responsible for how they show up, which is not how I recommend being with your friends. It's not what friendship's about. Friendship is not about you like only ever bringing your gold to your friends. That's boring, and it's kind of isolating. What there is for me to be with my friends is like crass, rude, funny, stupid, annoying, obnoxious, like blatant, all the stuff I never get to do or only get to do in bits and bobs as a coach. My friendships are for that stuff, and I get to be offensive and sometimes leave my friends feeling like, Adam, that's actually too far across the line. I gotta be like, oh, I'm sorry, my bad. My friend once said, like, do you ever gross yourself out, Adam? And I was like, yep, quite a lot. Anyhow, so the client is bringing this stuff innocently, and the coach innocently is going to step in it, provided that they are creating a relationship with enough depth and intimacy to allow it to show up. Remember, if you only sprinkle 3 or 4 iron filings on the paper, the pattern won't really become obvious. But if you're playing full out, if you're really leaning in with people, and if you're really offering them like the depth of relationship that's possible, you're going to step on a landmine. If my client is looking for evidence for how I don't take them seriously, eventually that's going to happen. And then in addition to that, we're all human. So even though I'm doing all my work to bring my garbage to my coach, even though I'm doing all this work to clear out the stuff that's showing up so that I can show up and create a really pristine space for my client, one, I'm going to step on a landmine, and two, probably sooner or later, I'm not going to take them seriously. Not because that's like who I am, but because that's part of being a human. And so it starts to become something that could be like a one-off becomes very magnified. And so inevitably, as time goes on, this stuff gets caught and it gets added to the dossier and it builds up and it builds up. And that's the point that really deep transformational coaching gets to, where there's a relationship breakdown. And in that relationship breakdown is the point where the client and the coach have to come together and clean it up. So the coach has to take responsibility and really see like, wow, I can really see how I created that for you. And I'm really sorry, and has to listen through the lens, not of, well, here's all the work I did so that this isn't what happened, and therefore that's your stuff. The coach has to listen through the lens. It's kind of ironic, because I would assert that what's going on in a coaching client conversation is like probably more the client stuff than the coach, given that the coach is assuming that they're doing their work, is doing a lot of work to be clean. But it doesn't matter, because the model of relationship that we're practicing is 100% responsibility. So as a coach, you got to just drop that and be like, how can I see how I completely co-created this? And how like the way I showed up actually did create that thing. And actually on some level, I probably was bored. And that, you know, we practice seeing all of that stuff. And so this is the work of leader and coach, is to acknowledge and to recognize that we're going to step into people's relationship patterns. We are playing out some version of the reciprocal of that. And that what has to be modeled is going first. So even though we can see like, well, but this person creates the relationship pattern of no one taking them seriously everywhere in their life. Why can't they see it? I need them to get it. Our job is just to apologize and clean up for it. And the reason that's so sacred is because that's what is not happening in this person's life anywhere else. Everywhere else, what's happening in this person's life is that they're getting told, well, that's your stuff. And they're left with this kind of open, unfinished loop. They're like, geez, what I actually need is the apology. Then I could take a look on this side. And that's the thing most of us don't want to do, because we can see the reciprocal playing out in the relational pattern over there. That's thorny stuff. Okay, so let's see what you wrote first, Marta. Marta wrote, the idea that you have to go through a breakdown to have a breakthrough. Is this always true? I think it is, but what are your thoughts? That is an excellent question. So, this is contentious. I've led at big coaching intensives where I was like with 150 different coaches. I've talked to a lot of different coaches around this. And this is the conclusion I've drawn. You don't have to agree with me, but this is the conclusion I've drawn, which is coaches, leaders that say, you don't have to have a breakdown. You can just have a breakthrough. That doesn't have to be that way. That's just a story. My contention is those people, one, have not really gone through the kind of breakdowns or the breakthroughs that I'm describing, like a real transformational one. And two, that they misunderstand this term. My experience is that most of those people confuse a breakthrough with awareness or insight. They confuse a breakthrough with the sort of change that's like rearranging the furniture in your apartment rather than knocking down your apartment and building a mansion. And the third part is we don't know what we don't know. So it's not even to make them wrong for it, because genuinely, I don't think they have any awareness of the kind of shift I'm talking about. And therefore, all that they can do is take the term breakthrough and apply it to what they do already know. So the example for this comes from one of my favorite books on transformation, which ostensibly has nothing to do with transformation. It's a book called Flatland, written in like the 1860s. Brilliant social commentary about like social class and structure and the role of women in society and stuff at that time. Don't read it for that. But the plot of Flatland is that Mr. Square, who lives in a two-dimensional world, is visited by Lord Sphere, who once a year visits someone in this 2D world called Flatland and tries to teach them about the third dimension. And it's very infuriating for Lord Sphere because Mr. Square, everything Lord Sphere tries to show him, Mr. Square takes and sticks inside of like, here's how he's doing that inside of a two-dimensional world. So Lord Sphere can exit a locked room. Mr. Square locks him in a room and Lord Sphere somehow escapes. And Mr. Square's like, how's he doing it? The answer to those of us who live in a 3D world is very easy. We're like, well, he just climbs up, he goes upward outside of the plane of Flatland, and then he just comes back and rejoins it. There's no magic to it. It's just that a two-dimensional box can't contain a 3D object like that can move. It can just go up, out, and then back down. But Mr. Square can't fathom that. And so he has to create these conclusions like, well, he must be a magician, or he must be he's a thief. He's a master lockpicker, blah, 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 blah. And so, oh, good. My camera's doing its little trick. It's probably time to buy a new camera, hey? Meow. And then, meow. We back. Boom. Solved. So, Mr. Square, if you talked about a breakthrough, the kind that would like lead to having an exposure to this third dimension and being able to operate within it, Mr. Square is going to think about all of his experiences inside of his life confined to this two-dimensional plane and be like, oh yeah, I understand what you're talking about. That's like blah, but it's not. It's sort of kind of like it maybe, but actually it's not, because none of what's happened up to this point involved the third dimension. And there is nothing in a world confined to two dimensions that is the same or even analogous to a third dimensional move. So these people that talk about, yeah, you don't need breakdowns, blah, blah, blah. My experience is that they're kind of stuck in this 2D plane and then just taking a 3D concept and drawing it into the world that they know. That might be a bit of you might feel like that's a bit of an arrogant take, and that's okay, but this is my experience. This is what I have like come to conclude when I witness this conversation. So let's talk about why I think it's absolutely essential to have a breakdown that leads to a breakthrough. Why you can't create one without the other. The first thing is that a breakthrough is where we gain access, like our circumstances don't change, but we gain access to an entirely new way of showing up in our life without having to have anything change. And that's not how we live our lives or pursue our goals. We're like, I need more money because then I would feel safe and then I would feel secure. So we are needing our circumstances to change in order to have a different experience, right? In order to have the experience of security and safety and all of that, I need money in my bank. If I change my circumstances, then I will change the way I'm being. Or I need my boss to respect and appreciate me, and I need people to like me or whatever, to respect me, because then I could be courageous, or then I could, go after what I want, or then X, Y, or Z. So all of this work, it's sort of, we're caught in like, I need my surroundings or how people show up or what I have or don't have. I need that to change, and then I can have this different experience. And if we go back to that analogy of Flatland and Mr. Square, it's sort of like Mr. Square might be like, ugh, I'm confined. I'm in this square box, and, I want to be free, but I can't. And if he was able to learn how to travel up into the third dimension, his surroundings haven't changed. And yet his experience of them radically shifts. So this is an analogy, of course. We're not able to climb into the fourth dimension unless you're some of the people on YouTube that I sometimes watch for a lark, which I assert you are probably not. So it's a joke that I think like is for me exclusively. I found that funny. Tetra cubes. So what happens is we mistake this idea of breakthrough. When you create a breakthrough, what changes is that you gain access to a new way of being that allows everything your experience of everything changes drastically. And then from this new way of being that you have available with the same circumstances, the rest of the world can start to change. Different possibilities open up and become available to you. Just like if Mr. Square can start to see a third dimension, now he has a whole new set of possibilities that are available that previously weren't there. This might sound fanciful, but if you talk to any of us that work in like transformational work, that's literally what happens when we create a breakthrough. Suddenly we have access to a new way of being where previously none was available. And from that new way of being, we're relating to our circumstances differently. We start to show up differently. We start to create different results because now we are transformed. We are showing up differently. Okay, so let's talk about why you got to have a breakdown to get that. There is a reason that we have a set patterned sort of approaches or possibilities or ways that we can be that are available to us. Maybe feeling heartbroken when I was young meant that I was weak and that people pitied me, which I hated, and that I got consoled, but it didn't really do anything. And I was kind of like, that's okay, but make sure you think about what you want to do next. So like being heartbroken, one, didn't feel good. Two, it was kind of regarded as weak or like pitiful or pitiable. And three, it didn't really matter because while I'd get patted on the head or whatever, you got to get back to work. So what's the point in this? So that experience of feeling heartbroken is unavailable to me. I can't do it. Or a better way to put it is that I've trained myself out of allowing that unconsciously. So I get to the point where I'm in my 30s, 40s, whatever, and I now have a life that is set up so as to avoid, I have a whole range of choices available, but none of those choices are going to include the possibility where I might have to allow myself to feel heartbroken or even reveal to people that I'm heartbroken. So I have all of these choices, right? Think of it like a pie wedge, all of this world of choices, but any part of the pie for which allowing heartbreak or feeling my heartbreak or exposing or revealing my heartbreak is not a part of the wedge that I have available. And so that's great, provided what I want to create in my life exists within this pie wedge that's available to me. But when we're seeking to create a breakthrough, it's almost always because we want something outside of this wedge of pie. We have decided, hey, I want a broader life. I want more. I want something that would require a bigger range rather than what's already here, which I'm really good at. So now what? And the now what is, okay, we create a breakthrough. To do so, I'm going to have to confront whatever that thing is that I built this whole contraption in the first place to avoid. So let's say I built this contraption, this personality sort of thing, where I'm someone who's never sad. And when you say stuff to me, I never really let it in very far. It kind of bounces off the surface. I give you the experience that I'm hearing the words you're saying, but you do not have the feeling that I actually let it in, that it really touched my heart or my core. So I'm very impervious. And I've basically built up all of this safety structure because what that does is it ensures I don't have to feel heartbroken. And what that does is it allows me to avoid the breakdown that would come from letting my heart break into the world, which is that people probably will pity me and people probably will feel bad about me. And some of the people in my life, because I surround myself with people that are like me, some of those people are going to actually be like, oh, that's too bad, but hey, what do you need to do next? And some of those people are going to give me a silver lining and blah, 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 blah. And so if I want to create the breakthrough, it's going to mean I let down this armor that I've built up to protect myself from all of that. And I allow myself to be exposed to the very thing I was wearing my armor to protect me from in the first place. So hopefully this makes sense so far, right? We build the armor to protect ourselves against a particular experience. And if we want to let down that armor, we are going to be exposed to that experience, and being exposed to that experience is the breakdown. So a very simple version of this, post coffee. A very simple version of this would be, I don't like people thinking I'm dumb. And then great, I can make a whole bunch of stuff happen in my life, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff that is unavailable to me because it would require putting myself at risk of people telling me I'm dumb. And that's just not available because I'm allergic to being told I'm dumb. I build up a brick wall to protect myself from that. Now I want to go out and I want to expose myself. I want to put my ideas out into the world. I want to be a thought leader, for example. So to do that, I have to start practicing and I have to start putting myself out there, not just in the places that are totally safe, because that avoids the breakdown. I have to be willing to go into the world. I have to be willing to let down my armor, let people's opinions of me actually matter, and share what I have. And then when I do that, some of those people are going to say, that's dumb. You can guarantee that will be the case because the world is abundant. And so unless you're putting your thumb on the scale to ensure that like there's no risk of this happening, in which case you're not really exposing yourself to life, you're going to put yourself out there and boom, you're going to get that feedback. That's the breakdown. So the breakdown doesn't have to mean your whole life crumbles to dust. It just means that you end up having to confront and face the very thing you've designed your life to avoid having to face. And when we hit that breakdown, what we want to do is jettison. We want to go back to what we knew because this experience it's not only new and unfamiliar to us, it's new and unfamiliar, and it's the thing we've crafted our whole life to avoid having to be with. So there's a bunch of residual kind of allergy to it. And so when it comes up, we're like, fuck this, I'm out. And that's how we avoid breakthroughs. Because we get our exposure to it and it's just hard to stay the course and to sit with it. So instead we peace out. And our brain tells us like, you know what? Your life's pretty good. You know what? This isn't how it's meant to feel. You know what? If you quit, you wouldn't have to feel this way. And then we think about that and we're like, oh, I feel such a relief. You know what, coach? I thought about this. I decided I'm going to quit and I've never felt better in my life. I know that this is the right choice. Sure. From your life as it is. Just like for the caterpillar in the chrysalis, going back to being a caterpillar is the best choice. It helps the caterpillar feel super calm inside because the chrysalis procedure kills the caterpillar. Literally, the caterpillar's cells are dying. And as the butterfly's cells are ideated into existence, the remnant to the caterpillar's DNA and immune system attacks and kills the butterfly until eventually the procedure overtakes it to the point that the butterfly can fully form. So that's the nature of a breakthrough. You can't have a breakthrough and a caterpillar can't become a butterfly by hanging on to being a caterpillar. And if you have found some version of that, let me know. You have defeated the metaphor. So that's why breakthroughs, Marta, absolutely, they require a breakdown by definition. It's not sort of like it's one goes with the other. It's not that like a breakthrough is this thing over here and a breakdown is a separate disjointed thing that can sometimes sort of happen, but you can avoid it with crafty planning. It would sort of be like wanting, like, is it possible to have hot water without the existence of cold water? No, because they're all part of temperature. So breakthrough and breakdown are all part of of transformation. And if we want transformation, those two come together. They are a packaged pair. All right, cool. I'm pretty good about how I landed that plane. Well done, Adam. What you got here, Darren? Darren's got a bunch of rad topics for us. Rising leaders. Rising leader. That sounds like a special move in a fighting game. Rising leader. Like the character would have like a double-breasted suit and a briefcase, and one of his attacks would be like rising leader. And then he'd probably have like leading up or some move like that. I don't know. Do you guys enjoy this fun, quirky take on leadership and fighting games combined into one? Okay, so rising leaders who get frustrated with their leaders, withholding information, or change their minds, deprioritize their projects. Ooh, juicy. And then they feel their work is wasted and then blame the leader for being a bad leader. And the importance of putting our clients and people we are leading at choice. Thank you so much, Darren. These are so good. So let's get ready to get so good. So I think this first topic in particular is really juicy because leading up is a hot topic. Hot topic. And it's a topic that our arrogance as leaders grabs a hold of, as well as like, it's just really juicy, and it's like a really easy place that we get stuck. So let me just have a sip here and read this one more time. So we have a leader who is getting frustrated with their leader because the person above, so we'll call leader one is Reggie. No, we'll call leader one Sophie. Nope, I'm going to use two male names to avoid any. No, I'm going to use two female names to avoid any of the stuff. So we've got Sophie on the bottom, and we've got Regina Phalange above her. So the rising leader, Sophie, is frustrated because Regina is withholding information, changing her minds, deprioritizing her projects. And then Sophie is left feeling like her work is wasted, and then blames Regina Phalange for being a bad leader. Probably something many of us can appreciate, acknowledge, understand, sympathize, empathize with on some level. Very, very common. So let's talk about the default here, especially if someone listens to a podcast like this one or reads leadership books about the right way to lead. Sophie is going to have this internal experience, which is like, I know what good leadership is meant to look like, and Regina, my leader, is not delivering it. And I've read some posts about leading up, and so it's time. It's time for me to do a thing. I'm going to be courageous. Leadership is about courage. I've got to step out onto the skinny branch, blah, 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 blah. And so what Sophie does is she goes to Regina and she says, hey, I'm frustrated because you're withholding information from me and you're changing your mind all the time and you're deprioritizing your project. And then my work is a waste and you're being a bad leader. And so what are you going to do about it? That's kind of the way it goes. And Regina is like, holy shit, what is this? And then probably reacts defensively or might do the other thing, which is like, well, Sophie, here's all of the stuff you do, blah, 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 blah. So let's look at this dynamic ontologically, because that makes us sound smart. Let me burp off mic. I turn away from mic to burp, and I do this gesture with my hands. Let's burp hands. So there's a couple of things that are happening in this dynamic. And we're going to put our attention on Sophie, not because Regina doesn't have work to do, but because anytime we're talking about leadership, we have to focus on the person whose leadership we want to develop. And because the way Darren's brought this topic, Sophie is kind of our client in this case, that's where we put our attention. We put our attention on what is there for Sophie to do or be in this instance, as opposed to how does Regina need to do or be. This allows us to get at the heart of the matter and do the work that's going to make a difference for Sophie. Because if Sophie is like, I should not, right? Like entitlement, I shouldn't have to do anything. Regina needs to change. That's fine. It's just not how a leader shows up to the world. That's a very at effect situation. What Sophie would effectively be saying is, I could lead, I could be effective, I could be the leader you need me to be, provided someone else changes. And that's not how leadership works. It's not what ontological, the being of leader, it's not what that's about. The being of leader is, I will meet the world as it is, rather than as I think it should be, and I will generate my leadership from that place. So that's why we look to Sophie. It's not to let Regina off the hook completely. She's got work too. It's more to put the attention at the place where the leadership actually resides. So what's happening is Sophie is frustrated with Regina. And notice that all of Sophie's attention is on what Regina is doing wrong. Regina is withholding information. Regina is deprioritizing my projects. Regina is wasting my work, or my work is wasted because of Regina. So the first thing that Sophie could do would be, instead of holding all of that with blame, pointedness, and exclusively with Regina, Sophie could get curious about this, full stop. She could start to get curious about like, I wonder why this might be happening, rather than just making an assumption about how Regina sucks. Like, if you gave Regina, Sophie, if you gave Regina the benefit of the doubt that you would give yourself, which is to say like, hey, there's a reason if I withhold information or deprioritize a project for one of my direct reports, why might that be? if you gave Regina that same kind of benefit of the doubt, well, what might the reasons be? We don't realize how, see my dog's in the background if you're live with me. We don't realize how little we are willing to do this. We very quickly form an opinion about how that person is, and then we relate to them through the opinion we formed about the way they are, which means they basically have no way to show up any different because we're just going to filter them however they show up. We're going to filter it through that lens. I have a friend who is frustrated with someone because they felt that he didn't respect women. This person in question I found very lovely. And I was just listening to my friend and I said, you know, I'm curious, not from there needing to be anything different, but is there any way that this person you're talking about could show up any differently? Because it occurs kind of like no matter what they do, it's going to fit inside of how you're holding them. And I'm wondering, like, do they have any chance with you? Like, is there any way that they could actually get out from under that? No, I wasn't asking that from like something they had to do. I wasn't calling my friend out. I'm just genuinely curious, like, it seems like they're kind of stuck in the doghouse. So this is something that would be available for Sophie as a starting point, is to bring some genuine curiosity towards Regina, to notice, hey, Sophie, you've got a listening for Regina. You've got a story. Hold on, get my hair nice. There we go. You've got a story about how Regina is and is not, and what they are doing and why they're doing it, that is completely unexamined. So that's the first place for Sophie to get to. And that can be really tough when we're frustrated and annoyed and we've done all this work on the project. But even if all Sophie did was that's going to start to open up her perspective. Instead of having this narrow scope of why Regina is the way she is and why she's a sucky leader, now Sophie might broaden it. The next place Sophie could look is, hey, why do you think this might be happening for you? Like, how are you complicit in this? And that's like, you'll notice that's a bit of a edgier step for Sophie to take, right? The first one is, what about letting Regina off the hook a little bit? The second is, what about putting yourself on the hook for a moment a little bit? What about taking a look at how might you be being that is contributing to the way this goes? And I'll tell you, we're always contributing in some way. There is no such thing as just like, you're not the person working that just comes around and gets hit in the head by a 2x4 and then it's like, well, it's Thursday, here comes the 2x4 again. There's some way we are co-creating this because we're always in some kind of relationship. And so there is a real power for Sophie to start to take a look on her side, not to let Regina off the hook, but to actually put Sophie on the hook so that she can take back her power, so she can start to be responsible. And if she's willing to do this kind of challenging work and look down the barrel of this, she might start to see like, well, you know, each time Regina tells me about something, I get really mad. So I can imagine that might actually kind of stop her or have her withhold information. And I guess I do get sort of like really attached and really frustrated when things change, which maybe could lead to Regina like being afraid to share with me. You know, if I gave Regina the benefit of the doubt, blah, blah, blah. So what that does is it helps Sophie start to see some of the stuff that she might be up to. What's up, Corbin? And so this can really allow Sophie to start to see the way she's co-creating this dynamic. And that is so powerful because then as a leader, if we can see that we're co-creating the dynamic, we can start to do something different on our side of the fence without needing Regina to be any different. That's how we become powerful leaders. Again, we meet the world, we learn how to work with the world the way it is. We learn how to create what we're committed to creating with the world the way it is rather than the way we feel it should be. And most attempts at leading up are ultimately about trying to make the world above us look the way we feel it should. Let me give my leader feedback rather than let me take a look on my side of the fence and see how there is for me to show up differently in terms of the work I'm doing and how I'm showing up for my leader. Yeah, and then they feel their work is wasted and blame the leader. So the third thing that I would put in front of Sophie is, let's assume that the way things are is that Minds are changing and that your projects are getting deprioritized, and that's the way it's going. Like, let's just take that as given. So that's the way it is at your company, and maybe that's the way it is for Regina. My question then to Sophie on the other side of these first two parts would be third, who are you going to be about that? Are you just going to be angry and annoyed and frustrated and stamp your feet impotently at your leader and insist that they should be different? Or are you going to meet the world as it is and figure out what do I need to do differently given that's the case? So if it was me and this was happening, I might start checking in with my leader more and say, hey, I've noticed something. I've noticed that like I get information late in the game and I'm wondering if it would be possible for you to give it to me a little sooner. Or actually, I'm wondering like what's having it go that way? Is there a reason that it seems to me like I'm just not being given what I need to know, but I'm wondering is there more to the picture that I don't know yet? Right? So I can start to bring curiosity to that. I could start to say like, hey, I noticed like the last 3 projects I've worked on, I've gotten them this far and then they've been deprioritized. So is there anything I can do to, I really want to work on something that's going to come to fruition. So is there anything I could do about that? Or I could change the way I'm relating to my project getting deprioritized. So instead of holding it like, my project didn't go all the way to completion, therefore my work is wasted, I could create a new context for myself. I could create a context in which to hold my work such that it's, hey, I'm getting practice every time I'm doing this. And I'm actually learning how to be with projects that have shifting timelines. I'm actually learning how to work with the dynamic nature of a project, fabric, a project tapestry that is not set in stone. And this will benefit me in any industry I go to that has sort of a shifting set of timelines, a dynamic nature to it. I could start to hold it that way so that I'm actually empowered by what's happening rather than disempowered. So notice that all of these set aside Regina needing to be any different. And the funny thing is that when we share this with Sophie, there's a predictable way that she will respond. I might say, okay, well, what about if you came to Regina and you asked about like, hey, there's a way I noticed this is going and I'm wondering, like, I'd really like to get out in front of that. I'd like to be a bit in front so that I can make sure that we have this go differently. Is there anything I can do, or would it be possible for you to tell me sooner? Typically, people like Sophie will respond and they'll say, oh, it's not going to work because I'll say that. And then Regina will say, nope, there's nothing we can do. And so notice that what Sophie's done is then put the attention back on how Regina's shortcomings are present and how Regina doesn't do what she needs and blah, 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 blah. And so that's where the work lies. Okay, great. So it sounds like asking about that hasn't been sufficient. You could get curious about how you're asking to see if maybe it's driving up defensiveness or not working. Or you could say, okay, great. So it sounds like there's nothing I can really do about that. And the best I can do for you and I, Regina, on this project is just to push forward as though it's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, let it be. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, great. And if that's what your leader tells you is what they need of you, then that's what they need of you. Part of our work is to, as people committed to ontological leadership, the being of leader, is to trust our leader in what they tell us. We can ask questions, we can check in, but if they're like, no, that's absolutely what I need, it's our job to do whatever work we have to do to set aside the story that like, well, this is the wrong way for things to be done. Yeah, according to you, but your leader is the one that steers the ship. And so, it's not the job of the crap, I'm already in trouble. I'm trying to use a sailing metaphor. I know a captain and I know 0 other jobs on a naval ship. But let's say we've got a coxswain, and let's say that term means someone who works the deck of the boat. The coxswain may be like, boy, the captain is choosing the wrong passage through the Mediterranean Sea. And the coxswain may be like, Captain, I mean, even this would probably be a far stretch, but let's imagine the coxswain goes to the captain and says, hey, I had this thought. I'm concerned. I think we may be stepping over something. And the captain says, thank you for that, but I'm clear. And this is the path we need to take. Then it's the job for the coxswain to work themselves out to honor that and move the ship in that direction. And so on some level, your ability to lead up is significantly, not even at some level, like significantly a part of that is working yourself out to be on board and aligned with the direction set by your leader and by their leader and by their leader and so on and so forth. And if you're not willing or able to do that, then you probably need to move to a new organization. What did you... Okay, Darren's saying, I'm a ridiculous below deck fan. So the metaphor stands. A mate, first mate. Yeah, there we go. That's a good one, Corbin. Number one. Although it's different. See, I should have gone with Star Trek metaphors. Bozo. I knew that there was a ship I could work with. Yeah, so Counselor Troy, if she felt that Captain Picard was making the wrong decision, she might let him know. But her job for the most part is to like go along with him and to support that vision set out by him. Corbin wrote, hey, Corbin, I think I already said hi to you, but Corbin wrote, could it be true, if not more true, that reverse the script on the judgment? So he's saying, like, let's say Sophie's got a story. Oh, Regina is always changing her mind and deprioritizing my projects. And that means that they feel that blah, 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 blah. And Corbin's asking, like, one thing we could say is, could it be true, if not more true, that Regina is blah, 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 blah. So yeah, 100%. That's like an example of kind of trying to provide Sophie with the thing. One step more powerful, I think, for Sophie and for our stand for her as coach and leader would be to invite her to do that work herself. So like, what else could be true here, Sophie, and let her figure it out. But if she's really struggling, we could be like, well, what about this? And then we can provide some things. So it's always most powerful when we invite people to create their own new story, as opposed to trying to provide them one. There's nothing as powerful as our own creation. But sometimes we need to move the dots a little closer to them so they can kind of, oh, got it. Like they can see it a little bit more clearly. That's a great, great topic, Darren. Thank you so much. And then the importance of putting our clients and the people we are leading at choice. Let me pour tea for that one. It's tea time. Beef tea jerky time. Oh, man. I don't know if anyone here likes the movie Trading Places. My friends and I watch, it's an early Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd movie. And we watch it every year while we play Magic the Gathering. It's our Christmas movie. So we get together, we drink eggnog, we play Magic the Gathering, we watch Trading Places. And there's a ridiculous scene in which Eddie Murphy plays a Cameroon, and he has a scene where he says, beef jerky time. And I'm worried these days in this era of hot takes and cancellation, if I can still reference the scene in the movie. Am I allowed to do that? I don't know. I want to. It feels good to say that it's beef jerky time. That's a satisfying thing to say. But I do see that the number of viewers from Facebook just dropped from 1 to 0. So maybe I got canceled. I don't know. Okay. At choice, I'm going to just talk about the concept of at choice. Darren's question. See you, Darren. Darren's question is, can you talk about the importance of putting our clients and people we are leading at choice? I'm just going to speak to that distinction. So at choice is the ability that I have to actually be making a choice about what's happening in my life. That sounds very, very simple, almost superficial, almost like a platitude. But it's actually one of the most profound parts of coaching and leadership. And like everything that's really profound and deep, it's consequently almost... Have you noticed how like the best platitudes, the wisest things become platitudes and then we ignore them? For example, in Zen, there's a saying, you cannot leave a place until you've been there. And we're like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock, thanks, moving on. And what that does is it stops us actually noticing how often we're trying to leave a place before we're willing to be there. For example, if I'm feeling sad, but I have a story that feeling sad's wrong and I don't want to be sad, and I'm actively telling everyone I'm not sad, sadness is weak, then I'm not going to actually be able to leave the place of my sadness that is lodged deep in my heart because I can't let myself be there. And so I'm actively trying to escape rather than being where I am. So this happens to all of these sort of punchy, like really deeply wise, profound things we can put into play in our lives. They become platitudes and then we step over them. And being at choice is the same idea. So to be at choice means I actually have the capacity to make a choice. And this is the number one heart, soul, and spirit of coaching and leadership, especially in the transformational realm. is to put people at choice. Now, being at choice sounds obvious, but the thing that's in the way of our ability to be at choice in our lives is our lack of awareness. So if let me see if I can drum up an example here. I was on I was having a conversation with someone over a decade ago. And this person what they brought to the conversation was sort of like, well, they've got this partner and the partner's not showing up the way they want them to, and they're not really sure. And how do I make them a particular way, and blah, 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 blah. And what I asked them was, well, is this person the one for you? Is this the one? Is this person the one that you want to be with? And they kind of like talked in a long circle for about 10 minutes. And when they finished talking, I said, so is this person the one? And eventually they said, no, I don't think so. And which was followed by, fuck you, Adam. But once I'd stood for them to answer that question for themselves, now they could be at choice. Up until this point, they were kind of futzing about in this conversation that avoided them having to really confront that. Once they were clear, this person's not the one, now they can make some choices. So they can choose, one, I'm going to leave the relationship. They're not the one. Or they can stay in the relationship and they can recognize this person's not the one for me long term. But I'm enjoying this relationship right now. But also, I'm probably like knowing that they're not the one. I'm probably only going to go so far in terms of what I take on for myself, my own work, and how much I expect from them. Or they could tell the person like, hey, I don't think we're long term, but like I'm really enjoying you and I'm open to, so all of these choices become available only once they come to accept or to see that reality for them. And one of the ways I see this show up most significantly in the coaching realm is that in the hiring process. So in the hiring process, we're often helping clients see what's available to them in their lives if they were to step out beyond their fear. And the way our fear works is it's designed to keep giving us more of what we already have, just scaled outwards, right? So remember earlier I talked about this pie wedge that is sort of like, this is all of the stuff that's available to you, given your rules about who you can be, who you can't be, what's possible, what's not possible, how it's okay to show up, how it's not okay to show up. So you have a pie wedge. And your fear will, from a life led out of avoiding your fear, protecting your fear, managing your fear, whatever you want to call it, will help you get more of this pie wedge. Meaning you can scale out. You can do what you're already reliable to do, harder, better, faster, stronger, etc. However, the game of possibility is everything outside of the bounds of that pie wedge. So rather than scale out further, rather than push the edge of that pie wedge out further, like vertically, I guess, or outwards from the center of the pie, transformational work, possibility-based work is about broadening the range, increasing the angle of your pie wedge from like 30 degrees to 60 degrees. So you have a wider wedge of pie, you have a wider amount of life that becomes available to you. And then if you scale out, that's a choice too, but now you just have more options. That's a life led from possibility. And to create the results that exist in that part of the pie, the new pie wedge, requires choosing out in front of our fear. There's an analogy I want to draw here. I hope I'm not jumping around too quick. I'm a little nervous that I am. I'm going to do it anyhow. So the nature of this practice, or sorry, the analogy is that a professor had written this essay, and it was about how students would come to him wanting to like understand whether it was worth it to pursue a master's degree. And what the professor found very challenging was he found that going through a master's degree, or it might have been a doctoral, like a PhD, he said that going through that changed the people such that on the other side of it, they had access to something that was not available at the start. So a transformational process, right? And the challenge was that only the version of them on the other side of the PhD could really understand the profound significance of the process they've gone through and really appreciate it for what it was. At the start, they couldn't. They were going to try to understand what would be available from inside of the world as it currently stood. So when we're looking down the barrel of our fear and considering making a choice into a coaching conversation, into a relationship with a coach, into that kind of commitment into our lives, and then everything we're going to do out in like as a result of that coaching relationship, we're kind of looking down the barrel of our fear. We're getting present to like, holy mackerel, if I did this, then these things would become available in my life. I would more access to friendships and I would make more money, blah, 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 blah. And then what our fear does is go, yeah, but look what it's going to cost you. And it tries to pull us back. So this happens no matter what. Every time someone's considering hiring a coach, unless the amount of money is insignificant to that person. So if I made you pay $5 a month and you didn't worry about the amount of time we were going to spend in a coaching conversation, meaning there's nothing really on the line, there's no stakes, there's no risk of you saying yes to me, then it's not hard for you to say yes. Right? There's no cost really. But if and I can also say, like, if someone's making $1 million a month, then me charging $100 per session, I'm probably not going to really call them to the mat. It's not going to wake them up or arrest them. However, if you're making $60,000 a year and I'm like, it's going to cost $10,000 to work with me, it's going to make you pause. You're going to feel arrested and have to like, consider some stuff. And so what happens is that clients get to this point, and then our job as coaches is to help them see that there's a choice available here from possibility, and there's a choice available from fear. The choice from fear is usually some flavor of like, I'm just going to go, it's the same thing we do everywhere else in our life. So it might be like, I just need to get the money first, or I just need to wait until this particular stressful moment in my life passes. But of course, once that passes, there'll be a new stressful moment. Or you'll try to get the money, but then there'll be a new emergency that requires your money. And then you'll try to get the money, and then there'll be a new thing that requires your money. And this is the nature of how our lives work, is whatever the thing in the way, it will keep getting in the way. It's just always going to be the case. And so where that leaves us is kind of recognizing our job as coaches to help someone see one way or the other, it's always going to be this thing. And you can choose the next iteration of this. You can choose, I just got to get this money this time, or I got to get this money the next time, or I got to get this money in 2 months or in 3 months. You can choose that. Or you can choose, I'm going to break this pattern up right now. And in order to do so, I have to make the choice before I feel quote unquote ready. Our job is to help someone get really clear that that's actually the choice in front of them. Instead of seeing it like, no, this time it's really different, because that's not really helping them be at choice. That's helping them just continue the same blind pattern they're in. And then what happens is a lot of people choose back into the safety of the fear-based pattern. And our job as coaches is to totally accept that. Our job as coaches is not to make them make the choice we think is right. Our job as coaches and leaders, I should say, is not to insist that they should do the thing that is way out on the skinny branches of possibility. Our job as coaches is to put them at choice and then let them choose. Our job as leaders is to put our direct reports at choice and then let them choose. So I'm going to finish with one more example of this in a leadership context, and then we'll wind down. So in a leadership context, imagine that you have a protocol at your organization that requires people fill out time cards every day. And you have yourself, and then you have like your direct report, and your direct report has 5 people, a team of 5 people they lead under them. And you notice that the team of people are not filling out their time cards. They're doing them once every 2 weeks, which means they're not very well put together. They're hard to follow. They don't have much information. They're vague, And the protocol isn't that. The protocol is at the end of each night, you do this. And so you go to your direct report who's leading these 5 people. We'll call this person Reggie, of course. And you say to Reggie, hey, Reggie, what's going on? I notice your people aren't actually filling the thing out. And Reggie tells you, oh, yeah, well, I think that that's kind of stupid. And I don't believe that it really is important. So my job in this instance, there's a bunch of stuff that I can do. I want to meet that with grace. Most of us leaders don't, but like the practice we want to bring is to meet that with grace and to get curious. Tell me more about that. Let me see if I can Like maybe you have a story about the time cards that's different than what we are. Maybe you're not aware of how this benefits us and in turn how this actually benefits you in the long run. Maybe you're just noticing the short term. So I can do all of that work. I can help Reggie get clear on that so he can see it. And then Reggie might be, yeah, I get it, man, but I'm just not bought in. I don't think so. I think this is stupid and I don't want to do it. So now my job as a leader is to put Reggie at choice. And the way that might sound would be something like this. Okay, Reggie, I got it. So I want to be clear. This is our protocol. This is like the rules. This is what we need to have happen in the organization. So it's okay one way or the other. You can choose how you show up. But if you're committed to leadership and simultaneous to that, you're unwilling to empower the protocols that we've agreed on here, that's going to create a problem for us. The problem is we have a leader who's actually not bought in to what we're trying to create. And so, there's going to be some consequences to that. Not like punishment, just consequences. Like we're going to have to lead around you. We're going to have to manage around the fact that you are not on board with us. And probably, longer term, we're going to seek to promote other people above you because those people are aligned with our vision. It's totally fine one way or the other, but I don't want to hide the consequences from you because there are. Every choice has some consequences. So just want to make that clear for you. Where do you want to go from here? So this is me putting Reggie at choice. I'm not telling him, look, do this or you're fired. I'm not hitting him in the head. I'm not micromanaging him. I'm just being very clear of the impact of his choices and then letting him make those choices. Now, some people will say, well, yeah, but you're laying consequences down. So you're effectively saying do this or you'll be fired. And the difference, excuse me, the difference is who I'm being about it and how I'm holding it. I'm actually telling Reggie, like, look, it's okay however you choose. And I'm actually holding that over here as his leader. I don't need you to do anything, but I also have an organization that I'm leading and I have to make some decisions based on that. So it's okay. We might be able to make this work for a while, probably not too long because it's pretty important. And this is like a thing that we're constantly having to deal with, but it's okay. We're going to choose based on your choice. So how do you want this to go? So that's our work, is putting people at choice and letting them choose. And then our job is to meet them in that choice and to act accordingly. So as a coach, that's often like, cool, okay, where do you want to go from here? Got it. You're going to go and you're going to see about creating the money this time. Do you want me to check back in 3 months? And we can see how it's going, if things are going differently or whatever. If I'm a leader, I can bring it back to them and be like, okay, great. So let me know if there's anything else, and then I'll talk to my people and we'll see what we're going to have to do based on the choice you're making. So what this does is it puts the reins in people's hands continually, and that's access to power. That really lets them be the one in charge of their life. The last parting shot I'm going to make on this is that what people don't want, and by people, I mean like me first, and then everyone else, we don't like consequences being attached to our choices. What we want is that I can choose that this time card is dumb and you should just align with me and there should be no consequence with that. But that's actually not how life works. Our choices always have consequences, positive ones and negative ones. And so being put at choice means being given the opportunity to make a choice, and then also being like having the consequences made clear to us and being related through those consequences. Like, great, this is how it's going to go given X, Y, and Z. When we stand for people that way, what happens is they become more and more responsible for their own lives because they are making a choice with total sobriety. We're not hiding from them how it's going to go. We're not lying to them. We're not making the decision for them. We're letting them be the one to choose. And the thing that a lot of coaches missed, if we go back finally to that situation where like the client's like, I'm actually going to just get the money together. This time it's different. What a lot of coaches miss is they're like, they're choosing from their fear. I failed them and the coaching didn't work. Wrong. What happened was you put them at choice and let them make the choice, and you brought to light, you brought to their consciousness the pattern. And sometimes, even if we can see the pattern, we need to do it another 3 times before like, fuck me, this isn't changing. This seems a lot like that pattern. And so even if all we did was brought to light the pattern and then let them stay in it, that's moving them closer to the moment they'll change the pattern. So that's how we have to hold this, the long-term view. Okay, good stream. Not bad, given that we didn't have our guest show up. I'm going to reach out to Reiko shortly, and we're going to reschedule it. Reiko's awesome, and you will love him. I'm very excited to have him on the pod. So we'll get him here soon. As always, if you have topic suggestions, things that you think would be cool leadership conversation or topics, you can put a comment on this live if you've listened to it. You can email me, adam@adamquiney.com. It's a huge support to me. Don't do it because you think like, boy, I'd like to know the answer to this. I mean, do it for that, but do it for me. Do it because it's easier when I get a suggestion. Okay, have yourselves a great weekend. See y'all later.